The morning fog still hung low over the ridge when the first backhoe claw hit something that wasn't rock. It was late October, and the men from Connor's Construction had been working since sunrise, clearing ground for a new water reservoir off County Road 17 in western Arkansas. The project was supposed to be routine. The county had approved it months earlier, a plan to bring clean water to a half-dozen farming communities. But at 9:42 a.m., the sound of metal scraping bones stopped everything. Foreman Dale Connors leaned over the trench, squinting through dust and diesel haze. "Could be an animal," one of the younger workers muttered. But Dale knew better. There was fabric, rotted, clinging to what looked like a sleeve, and beneath it, the unmistakable curve of a skull. By the time the sheriff's deputies arrived, half the crew was sitting on their tailgates, pale-faced, silent. The site was cordoned off with yellow tape that flapped uselessly in the wind. Sheriff Paul Reddick, mid-60s, gray-stubbled and weathered by years of small-town politics, walked the perimeter with his deputy. "Mark it, and don't touch anything else," he said, voice low. "Get the coroner out here, and call state." Because even in a town as small as Fairvale, Arkansas, one body wasn't just a problem. It was a headline waiting to explode. But by that evening, when the coroner unearthed the second body, then the third, the sheriff realized something worse. Whatever had happened here hadn't been an accident. It had been buried, deliberately, and not recently. The bones were old, the clothing out of time, stiff denim, buttons that hadn't been used since the late 1970s. When the state forensics team arrived 2 days later, they confirmed it. There were 4 complete skeletons, all male, each with fractures consistent with blunt force trauma. It should have been a cold case from the start, a tragic curiosity from decades past. But when the sheriff's office pulled the original land records, they discovered something strange. The site, before it was sold to the county, had belonged to a man named Carl Denson, a name that hadn't appeared in a police file since 1982, when he vanished after being questioned in connection with a string of missing drifters. Back then, the case had gone nowhere. There were rumors, bars, truck stops, halfway houses, but no witnesses, no charges. The file was quietly shelved, until now. The news hit local radio by the 3rd day. "Skeletal remains found at County Reservoir project," the announcer said in his easy morning tone. "Authorities say foul play is suspected." But what the radio didn't mention, what no one outside law enforcement yet knew, was that alongside the bones, investigators had found a rusted badge. A police badge, half buried in clay and gravel, marked with a faded number, 4271. It belonged to a Fairvale police officer named James Jim Lawton, who'd gone missing in 1983, just after testifying against his own department in a corruption hearing. Sheriff Reddick stood over the evidence bag that evening, in the dim light of the station's evidence room. The tag read, "Fairvale PD property," but there was no record of it ever being logged, no mention of Lawton's disappearance in the current department archives. "Who's been cleaning files?" he muttered. Deputy Carson looked uneasy. "You think this ties back to Denson?" "I think somebody didn't want it tied to anyone," Reddick said. He ordered the old file room reopened. It hadn't been touched in years. Dusty shelves, cracked boxes, handwritten labels from the 70s and 80s. They found the file after midnight, marked case number 81-119, transients, Highway 19. Investigation closed. Inside were faded Polaroids, photos of missing men, all with similar builds, all drifters, truckers, or farmhands. Each had disappeared between 1979 and 1982. And then there was the note, typed, unsigned, but clipped to the last page. They knew. Check the old quarry before it's covered. It had been dated July 3rd, 1983, just 3 days before Officer Lawton vanished. By the time state investigators called in the FBI, Fairvale's single main street had turned into a circus. Reporters, trucks, satellite vans parked outside the diner. Locals whispered about the Reservoir graves. Parents told their kids not to wander near the woods. The mayor, red-faced and sweating through his tie, tried to keep things calm. "We're cooperating fully," he told the cameras. "This was a tragedy buried in the past." But the past, as Sheriff Reddick knew too well, doesn't stay buried. 2 of the skeletons had healed fractures on their ribs, injuries consistent with beatings. Another had a fractured wrist that had healed long before death. Whoever these men were, they'd been hurt before, controlled, and one of them had a broken badge chain in his ribcage. When the forensics team reconstructed the fragments, it wasn't another officer's badge, it was handcuffs. Someone had cuffed at least one of them before killing him. Reddick leaned back in his chair that night, the file spread across his desk. The rain hammered against the station windows. He'd been a rookie back in '83. He remembered the rumors then, about officers on the take, backroom deals, cleanups of transient troublemakers around the old highway expansion. Fairvale had been a different place, poor, isolated, dependent on state money. The new highway had promised jobs, contracts, and federal funding. And when some of those drifters went missing, nobody in town had asked questions, until Lawton did. The sheriff rubbed his face. "He tried to blow the whistle," he said quietly. Deputy Carson frowned. "Then who buried him?" Reddick looked out at the rain. "That's what we're about to find out." The FBI's arrival changed everything. Special Agent Denise Cole, 39, sharp-eyed, from Little Rock, took over the coordination. She was calm, methodical, and already irritated by the press. She met Reddick at the site. The earth had been sectioned into grids, each bone photographed and labeled. "We've got 4 sets confirmed," she said. "We'll need to run DNA, but initial dental records suggest at least one match to a missing person from 1981. Robert Bobby Henning, arrest record out of Oklahoma, last seen in Fairvale." "Transient?" Reddick asked. "Yep, picked up for trespassing, released without charge. Guess he never left town." Cole glanced up from the trench. "Sheriff, I've read your old reports. You were a deputy here when Lawton disappeared, right?" Reddick nodded. "He was a good man. Too good for this town." She studied him. "Then help me understand this. Why were all his case files sealed? They weren't destroyed, just moved to inactive storage, unlisted." He hesitated. "Politics. We had a chief back then, Earl Brogan. He ran the department like it was his farm. You didn't cross him." "Where is he now?" "Dead. Died in '97. Heart attack." Cole made a note. "Still, somebody kept those files hidden for 40 years. That night, as the town lights flickered across the half-drained reservoir pit, a worker from the county utilities team came to Reddick's office holding something wrapped in a tarp. "Found this wedged in the old drainage line," he said. Inside was a rusted revolver, .38 caliber, and a wallet. The leather was cracked, but inside, the ID was still legible. James Lawton. Fairvale PD. Reddick stared at it for a long time. "Get me Agent Cole," he said finally. "We've got our first piece of the past." But before dawn, a call came through from the evidence lab. The gun had been wiped long ago. But one thing remained etched into the metal. 4 partial serial digits. And when cross-referenced against the department's old records, it came back as a match. The gun had been issued to another officer in 1981. Badge number 4219. Chief Earl Brogan. By sunrise, the Reservoir site was sealed off completely. The media was told it was a hazard investigation. But in a quiet corner of the sheriff's office, behind a locked door, a new case file was opened. Case number 2531B. Fairvale Graves, reopened under federal review. Inside, Sheriff Reddick clipped 2 photographs side by side. The 4 skeletons under gray Arkansas mud, and a faded black and white image of Chief Brogan's 1982 department portrait. Same uniform, same badge chain, and pinned beside them, the rusted number, 4271, Officer Lawton's badge. The man who'd tried to uncover the truth, and had been buried with it. Outside, the reservoir waters lapped quietly against the new concrete wall. By the time construction resumed, they'd renamed it Lake Brogan, and no, Wanta, not the county, not the mayor, not the contractors, knew that beneath its calm surface lay a secret that had waited 40 years to be unearthed. The kind of secret that could still destroy lives. Because the files that went missing back in 1983 weren't lost. They were hidden. And someone in Fairvale still remembered exactly where. The morning after the discovery of Lawton's badge, Fairvale woke to the sound of helicopters. The FBI had brought in a full excavation crew, their white tents lined along the newly cordoned-off section of the reservoir. The air smelled of mud and diesel, but underneath it was something else. The metallic trace of rot and rust unearthed from 4 decades underground. Sheriff Reddick watched from the ridge. He hadn't slept. Coffee trembled in his hand as he looked over the site where the workers had first dug. Now a field of numbered stakes and camera tripods. "Feels like we're digging up the whole damn town," he muttered. Beside him, Agent Denise Cole adjusted her sunglasses. "Maybe we are." She wasn't smiling. She rarely did. In her hand was a folder stamped, "Federal Investigation. Fairvale Graves." She turned a page. DNA came back on one of the other bodies overnight. Name's Raymond Holt, truck driver, reported missing out of Little Rock in '81. His last known contact? She looked up. Fairvale Police Department. Reddick felt the muscles in his jaw tighten. He'd seen Holt's name before, buried deep in Lawton's old notes. "Picked up for questioning," he said quietly. "That's what the record said." Cole nodded. "But there's no arrest report, no log entry, nothing after that." She closed the folder. "The Bureau's starting to think these weren't random drifters, Sheriff. Someone was picking them up and making sure they disappeared." Reddick's voice was low. "Back then, we called it keeping the roads clear." Cole studied him. "Meaning?" He took a long breath. "Meaning the chief didn't like outsiders. Said they brought crime, drugs, bad influence. A few of us, we thought it was just tough talk. And Lawton? He didn't. He started digging. Thought the department was running an off-the-books cleanup job. Maybe worse." Cole's tone hardened. "And now we've got 4 dead men, including him." The next afternoon, Reddick returned to his office. The blinds were drawn. The smell of old paper filled the room. He pulled another box from the archive room, one marked 1981 Incidents, unsorted. Inside, beneath stacks of faded forms, he found what he was looking for, a cassette tape, labeled Interview 412-82, Holt. He stared at it for a long time before sliding it into the old recorder. The tape hissed to life. Then a voice, calm, southern, male. Name? Raymond Holt. You were hitching east on Highway 19? Yeah, guy in a blue Ford picked me up. Said he was with the county crew. There was a pause. Did he tell you where he was headed? Said he was taking me up by the quarry. Offered a job for cash. A click. Static. Then the voice again. Did you get there? A long silence. Then Holt's voice, uneasy. I told him I had to think about it. He didn't like that. The recording ended there, cut off abruptly, mid-conversation. No sign-off, no follow-up log. Reddick sat back, staring at the wall. Jesus. Lawton must have taken the tape himself before he disappeared. It was proof he'd been on the trail, and that someone had stopped him before he could finish. Later that evening, Reddick met Agent Cole again, this time in the motel conference room the Bureau had converted into a command center. On the wall, they'd pinned photos of the excavation grid, a map of Fairvale from 1982, and a line of portraits. Brogan, Lawton, the 4 confirmed victims. Cole pointed to the quarry on the map. This was county-owned in '82. Leased to the construction division, Reddick said. Used for fill rock during the highway expansion. She traced a red circle. That highway project, the same one Chief Brogan pushed through? Reddick nodded slowly. Yeah, he called it his legacy. Cole turned to him, and he had a private security contract through the same company that got the state bid. Reddick frowned. You're saying he was skimming money? I'm saying the FBI has reason to believe Brogan was running a side operation, using county resources for his own jobs. Men like Holt and Henning? Cheap labor, off the books. If they caused trouble, they disappeared. Reddick's hand tightened around the edge of the table. You think Lawton found proof? Cole's eyes met his. I think he found bodies. 3 nights later, Fairvale's quiet cracked open again. A local journalist, a woman named Tess Malone from the Fairvale Gazette, published an online article. Reservoir dig uncovers police badge. Sheriff's office, mum on details. It spread fast. Within hours, the story hit Little Rock TV. Comment sections flooded with speculation. Police cover-up, serial killer, government corruption. The mayor called Reddick at midnight. You've got to shut this down, he barked. You'll tank the reservoir funding. We've got contracts on the line. Reddick said nothing for a long time. Then, Mayor, there are 4 dead men under that lake. You want me to tell people to forget it? People forget things every day, the mayor hissed and hung up. Reddick stared at the phone. Outside, lightning flickered over the water. For a long time, he thought about what Brogan had said to him all those years ago, when he'd first joined the force. In this town, loyalty's worth more than truth. Now, 40 years later, he finally understood what that meant. The next morning, Agent Cole received an envelope. No return address. Just her name, typed cleanly on the front. Inside was a single photograph. A Polaroid. Taken sometime in the early 1980s. 4 men standing beside a pickup truck near what looked like the quarry. 3 wore uniforms. 1 was in a torn denim jacket, face bruised, wrists behind his back. On the back, in fading ink, were 4 words. The last one talked. Cole brought it straight to Reddick. He turned it over slowly, his stomach tightening. "That's Brogan," he said. "That's Officer Reese on the left. And that looks like Lawton." Cole's tone was steady. "Then who's the man in the jacket?" Reddick hesitated. "If I had to guess, that's Bobby Henning, the transient they found in the pit." Cole's voice dropped. "Then that photo was taken before he died. And whoever sent it," Reddick said quietly, "is still alive." They traced the envelope back to a P.O. box in Boone County, registered under a fake name. But the handwriting on the back matched something in the old records, Lawton's notes. Specifically, a single page he'd written days before, vanishing. "If anything happens, tell Anna." "Anna." Cole looked up. "You know anyone by that name?" Reddick nodded slowly. "His wife, Anna Lawton. She left town after he disappeared. Moved north, maybe Missouri. She never came back." "Then we find her," Cole said. It took 2 days. But when they did, she wasn't hard to recognize. Late 60s now, silver hair, still sharp. She lived alone in a small house outside Springfield. Cole and Reddick drove up together. Anna opened the door before they even knocked. "You're here about Jim," she said. Her voice was tired, but steady. Cole nodded. "We found something at the reservoir." Anna didn't flinch. "I knew you would. He told me they'd try to bury it. Said if the quarry ever flooded, it would come up again." Reddick stepped forward. "Mrs. Lawton, did your husband ever tell you who was involved?" She looked past him, out the window. "He said they were men he worked with. Said they thought no one would ever notice a few lost souls on the road." Cole showed her the Polaroid. "Do you recognize this?" Her hands trembled as she took it. "That was the night he came home bruised. Told me to burn his notes. I didn't." She turned to the living room, disappeared for a moment, then came back holding a box wrapped in tape. Inside were folders, cassette tapes, and a small notebook with faded handwriting. "Fairvale PD, Highway 19, July 82. They made me dig." Cole stared at the line. "Dig what?" Anna's voice was quiet. "He said they made him bury someone. Said if he refused, they'd put him in the same ground." Reddick's throat tightened. And they did. That night, back at the motel, Cole went through the box. Most of the tapes were blank, erased, but one was labeled Confession, 7283. They played it. Jim Lawton's voice came through, shaky but clear. "If anyone hears this, I need you to know what happened. Brogan said we were just cleaning up the highway, but it wasn't cleanup. They were picking men up, using them for the quarry project. No pay, no records. When one of them talked, they made me go out there. They made me dig the hole. I tried to help, but they found out I'd called the state. They're watching me now. If this tape survives, it's because they didn't." Silence followed. Then the faint sound of knocking. A muffled shout. The tape ended. Cole sat back, exhaling. "That's enough for federal homicide charges, even if Brogan's dead." Reddick nodded, but something in his gut twisted. Brogan had been the face of it, yes, but not the only one. "Who else was there that night?" he said. Cole looked at him. "What are you thinking?" Reddick leaned forward. "That we're about to find out the whole town was built on more than just that reservoir." Outside, the night wind howled across the water, and beneath it, the ground shifted, as if the past itself was trying to rise. The wind had changed by the time they returned to Fairvale. What had been a small-town story had now become a statewide scandal. The Arkansas Gazette, Channel 7 News, Even national reporters had started circling like vultures. Every front porch in town was alive with whispers about buried men, corrupt cops, and secrets that went deeper than the reservoir itself. Sheriff Paul Reddick's office phone rang every 10 minutes. The governor's liaison, the county board, the mayor, all demanding containment. But how do you contain ghosts that have been waiting 40 years to be heard? Agent Denise Cole sat across from him, her laptop open, eyes on the new forensics report. The DNA on Lawton's revolver matches his wife's testimony. He handled it right before death, she said. But here's what's stranger. The bullet fragments we found inside one of the bodies don't match that gun. Reddick frowned. Then we've got 2 weapons. Maybe more. She tapped the folder. The forensics team just pulled another slug from the 4th skeleton. Different caliber entirely. Looks like a .45. Whoever did this wasn't sloppy. They wanted confusion. He leaned back in his chair. The fan buzzed overhead, useless against the heavy air. You think there were multiple shooters? I think there were multiple officers, she said quietly. And I think your old department helped cover it up. That afternoon, Reddick walked into the Fairvale Police Archives for the first time in decades. The new chief, a thin man named McKellen, had reluctantly given permission to open the sealed room in the basement, the one with records from 19. The air was thick with dust and mildew. Faded folders leaned sideways in cracked metal cabinets. On the back wall, a sign still read, "Authorized personnel only." He found what he was looking for in the bottom drawer, an old logbook, pages yellowed and curling. The entries were handwritten, uneven, but consistent. June 14, 1981. Subject transferred to holding. June 15, 1981. Released, no charge. June 18, 1981. Subject moved, per Brogan directive. Then the entries stopped. Flipping forward, Reddick found another line scrawled in different ink. All transients to quarry. No paperwork. His stomach dropped. It wasn't just Brogan's operation. It was departmental procedure. He took photos of every page and carried them upstairs, straight to Cole. She scanned the images silently, her expression tightening. They were trafficking them. Unpaid labor for county work. And anyone who fought back ended up in the ground. Reddick finished. Cole closed the file. We'll need to find who was still alive from that roster. Who signed off on these transfers? Reddick hesitated. 2 names I remember. Officer Reese and Lieutenant Harold McClintock. Cole raised an eyebrow. Where are they now? Reddick exhaled. Reese died in '88. Car wreck. But McClintock? He's still here. Runs a bait shop outside town. The bait shop sat along the edge of Highway 19, its peeling sign half swallowed by kudzu. When Reddick and Cole pulled up, the man behind the counter looked up with watery eyes. Late 70s now, skin leathery, hands trembling. Well, I'll be, he rasped, squinting. Sheriff Reddick, you still chasing ghosts? Reddick didn't answer. You remember a man named Raymond Holt? McClintock froze, the faint rattle of the fan behind him the only sound. Can't say I do. Cole set a photo on the counter. The Polaroid. The quarry. Brogan. Lawton. Henning. McClintock's jaw twitched. Where'd you get that? It doesn't matter, she said evenly. We know what happened out there. What we don't know is who pulled the trigger. For a moment, he looked like he might laugh. Then he looked past them, toward the empty road. You think it was just Brogan? He said finally. We all did what we had to. The state wanted that highway done. Deadlines. Budgets. We had transients stealing, fighting, wandering onto sites. Brogan said the county'd take care of them. Nobody asked questions. Reddick's voice was quiet. You killed them. McClintock's hands shook. No, I was there. Yeah, but I didn't shoot. I just dug. Cole leaned in. Who did, Harold? He hesitated, then whispered, You wouldn't believe me. Try us. McClintock swallowed hard. It wasn't just cops. There were men from the construction company too. County contracts, private security. One of them. He ran the site after Brogan left. Name was Victor Hanlon. Cole frowned. Hanlon, the county's current infrastructure director. Same one, McClintock said. He took over after Brogan retired, made sure no one went near the quarry again. Back at the motel, Cole ran Hanlon's name through federal databases. The results were clean. Too clean. No criminal record, no disciplinary marks, nothing. But what stood out was his career timeline. Project manager for the Highway 19 expansion in 1981. Then a steady climb through county infrastructure until he'd become director in 1995. Perfect paper trail, she muttered. Reddick sat beside her. He's been handling every major project for 40 years, including the Reservoir. Cole turned the screen toward him, which means he signed off on the dig that uncovered the bodies. They both fell silent. He knew, Reddick said finally. He knew we'd find them eventually. Cole looked up. Or maybe he wanted to make sure we didn't find the right thing. That night, someone broke into the sheriff's office. The alarms went off at 2:13 a.m. By the time Reddick arrived, one of the basement storage rooms was on fire. Files, the old logbooks and evidence photos, were burning in a pile. He and a deputy doused the flames, coughing through smoke. But it was too late. Half the evidence was gone. When Cole arrived minutes later, soot still in the air, Reddick handed her what was left, a single charred page. Only one line was still readable. Ensure all reports destroyed before inspection. Cole's eyes darkened. This isn't random. Hanlon's cleaning up. Then we get him first, Reddick said. They found Hanlon at his office the next morning. County Infrastructure Headquarters, a low beige building near the fairgrounds. He greeted them with a politician's smile. Sheriff, Agent Cole, come on in, he said smoothly. Heard about your little archaeological find. Terrible business, all that old dirt coming up again. Cole didn't sit. We've got witnesses placing you at the quarry in '82. Hanlon's smile didn't falter. I was the site supervisor. It was my job to be there. 4 men were killed, she said, including a police officer. You expect us to believe you didn't see anything? He shrugged. Back then, people went missing all the time. You dig around long enough in this state, you're bound to find bones. Reddick stepped forward. We found your signature on transfer orders for those men. You signed their names off county payroll the week they vanished. For the first time, Hanlon's jaw tightened. That's a serious accusation, Sheriff. Reddick's tone was low. No, Victor. It's a confession waiting to happen. Cole laid a photo on his desk, the Polaroid. You were there, the man with the hat. That's you, isn't it? He glanced at it, expression unreadable. I suppose it could be. You helped bury them, she said. Hanlon leaned back in his chair, the smile returning, thin and cold. And what are you going to do about it? Brogan's dead. McClintock's half blind. You think anyone in this town's going to take your word over 40 years of history? Reddick's hand curled into a fist. We'll let the Bureau decide that. Hanlon stood, buttoning his coat. Then I'll expect my lawyer's call. Good luck explaining to the county why their sheriff's office torched evidence." He walked out, calm as ever. Cole exhaled. "He's daring us to try." Reddick stared after him. "Then we'll give him a reason to be scared." That evening, Cole received a voicemail, a distorted male voice. "You're digging too deep. Hanlon wasn't the one who gave the order. Check the water records. 1983. Reservoir design wasn't new. It was reused." The call ended abruptly. When they traced the number, it was disconnected. Cole pulled up old engineering archives, searching for the reservoir's original blueprint. What she found made her blood run cold. The design, dimensions, location, even soil data matched an earlier proposal dated 1983, the same year Lawton disappeared. But the plan had been marked Abandoned Project, Fairvale Water Cooperative. "Why reuse an abandoned blueprint?" she said aloud. Reddick looked over her shoulder. "Because the first one wasn't abandoned," he said quietly. "It was buried." The next morning, Cole received confirmation from the state archives. The 1983 project had been halted due to ground instability after a sinkhole formed near the old quarry. But the geotechnical report she received attached a photo. Grainy, black and white. The same spot where the reservoir now stood. And in the corner of that photo, half hidden by shadow, stood a man in a county engineer's jacket. Victor Hanlon. Reddick's voice dropped to a whisper. "He's been guarding that ground his whole life." Cole nodded. "Because something else is still down there." At sunset, they returned to the reservoir. The water shimmered red under the dying light. Construction crews had left for the day, the machinery silent. Cole stood at the fence, staring out across the calm surface. He thought flooding it would keep it safe, but erosion's exposing everything. Reddick's eyes followed hers. "What if those 4 weren't the only ones?" She turned to him. "You think there are more bodies?" He nodded slowly. "I think the quarry's deeper than we ever thought, and I think Jim Lawton tried to stop them before they filled it." Cole's phone buzzed. A text, no ID attached. "You're standing over the 5th. She looked out at the water again. A chill ran through her. "What?" Reddick asked. "The 5th body," she said quietly. "They're telling us where to find it." The reflection of the floodlights shimmered across the dark reservoir, and beneath it, something pale, almost bone-colored, glimmered just below the surface. Cole exhaled. "We need to drain it." Reddick nodded. "Then let's open the gates." The decision to drain the reservoir came at dawn. By then, the county was already trying to shut them down, citing environmental hazards, budget constraints, anything to stall. But Agent Cole had pulled federal emergency authority, and Sheriff Reddick, standing shoulder to shoulder with her at the water's edge, made the call himself. "Open the spillway," he said. "All of it." Metal groaned as the gate valves turned. The lake began to bleed. At first, nothing happened but the low hiss of rushing water. Then, slowly, the level began to drop, exposing the jagged edges of stone, the black muck of 40 years' worth of sediment. The smell hit next. Decay and diesel, old oil, and something faintly human. By noon, half the lake was gone. And that's when the excavators found it. At grid D3, near the center of the drained bed, a bucket caught on something heavy. The operator stopped immediately. A team moved in with shovels, scraping away layers of clay and shale until the outline emerged. A rusted metal drum. Cole crouched beside it, camera light sweeping across its corroded surface. The lid had been welded shut, but erosion had cracked the seam. When the forensic tech pried it open, the stench of rot spilled into the air like poison. Inside was what was left of a man, still in uniform, still wearing a badge. The tag read 4271. Sheriff Reddick went silent. "Jim Lawton," Cole whispered. They sealed the site within minutes. No media, no mayor, no county officials. Only the bureau, the sheriff's office, and the coroner. The skeleton was intact, wrapped in a plastic sheet. Inside the barrel were two other things, a revolver and a small tin box. Cole carefully opened the tin. Inside were folded papers, water-damaged, but legible enough to read the letterhead. United States Department of Transportation. Internal memo. July 1983. The memo referenced the Fairvale Highway Work Program, noting undocumented labor use and a pending investigation. Attached was a single sticky note in smeared blue ink. They found out. VH. Cole held it up. Victor Hanlon. He knew the feds were coming. Reddick nodded slowly. So he buried Lawton to shut him up before the investigation hit. And flooded the site, Cole added. Turned the crime scene into infrastructure. When the news broke that the sheriff's team had found a fifth body, the story exploded. By afternoon, every major network was broadcasting live from Fairvale. Helicopters hovered over the drained reservoir. The county courthouse steps swarmed with reporters. But behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding. Agent Cole sat in a federal interrogation room across from Victor Hanlon. He'd been brought in for questioning, but he looked almost amused, like a man watching a play he'd already seen. "You've got no proof I killed anyone," he said calmly. Cole slid the tin box across the table. "Then explain this." He glanced at it, unblinking. "Old paperwork. Doesn't prove murder." She leaned forward. "It proves you knew there was an investigation, that you were involved in undocumented labor tied to the highway project, that you had motive, access, and control of the quarry where those men were found." Hanlon's voice stayed even. "You can't tie me to the killings." Cole stared at him for a moment. Then she pressed play on a small recorder. "They made me dig the hole." Lawton's voice echoed through the room. "Hanlon said it'd be quick. Said the water would hide it." Hanlon's jaw twitched. Just once. Cole leaned back. "You've been hiding behind dead men for 40 years, Victor. But Lawton recorded everything." He looked at her, eyes narrowing. "You think the county's going to let you destroy its golden boy? You think they'll believe a dead man's tape?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because at that exact moment, through the glass, Sheriff Reddick was handing the forensics chief another piece of evidence, the revolver from the barrel. The serial number was faint, but visible under black light. Issued 1981, property of Victor Hanlon. 2 days later, the official charges came down. 5 counts of first-degree murder, multiple counts of conspiracy, obstruction, and falsification of state documents. But before the U.S. Marshals could transport Hanlon, something happened. At 3:17 a.m., the guard found him dead in his holding cell, an apparent heart attack. No sign of struggle, no weapon, just silence. Reddick arrived 30 minutes later, still in his coat. He stared at the body through the glass. "Convenient," he muttered. Cole joined him. He was 69. Could have been natural. He looked at her. Could have been arranged. She didn't answer. Later, when they processed Hanlon's personal effects, they found one last item, a folded page torn from an old notebook. It had been hidden inside his shoe. The handwriting was neat, precise, and familiar. It wasn't just us. They gave the orders from higher up. The state wanted it clean. If you're reading this, the quarry's not the end. Check the records near Black Hollow Bridge. Same year, same crew. Cole exhaled slowly. There were more sites. Reddick closed his eyes. This wasn't one crime. It was a network. By the end of the week, Fairvale was unrecognizable. The reservoir was declared a federal crime scene. The mayor resigned. The county board announced an emergency audit of all infrastructure projects dating back to 1980. And through it all, the townspeople watched quietly, as if the ground itself had turned on them. At Lawton's funeral, the sheriff's department lined the small church steps in full dress. His wife, Anna, stood in front, holding the folded flag they'd finally been able to give her after 40 years. When the service ended, she approached Reddick and Cole outside. "He told me the truth would come back," she said softly. "Said water doesn't keep secrets forever." Reddick nodded. He was right. Cole looked toward the drained reservoir beyond the hill. The mud still glistened in the afternoon sun. "We'll keep going, Mrs. Lawton, wherever this leads." Anna smiled faintly. "Then you'll find more men who never came home." 3 weeks later, a federal construction audit confirmed what Hanlon's note implied. 2 other bridge projects from 1983 and 1984 used the same contractors, same material orders, and same Momo undocumented labor lists as the Fairvale site. Cole and Reddick drove to the first, Black Hollow Bridge, 20 miles north. The river ran low that winter, exposing concrete pillars streaked with rust. They parked by the embankment. Cole took out her camera. "Look there," Reddick said quietly. Just below the waterline, in the shadow of the bridge, a pale shape jutted from the mud. Bone. That night, back in Fairvale, the sheriff's office lights stayed on long after midnight. Reddick stood at the window, staring at the dark horizon where the drained reservoir stretched like a wound. Cole entered quietly, a stack of papers in her hand. "Autopsy's in. Lawton was shot once in the chest. Post-mortem blunt trauma. Time of death matches early July '83. He nodded, barely speaking. "He was right there, Paul," she said softly. "All this time." Reddick finally turned to face her. "I spent 40 years keeping quiet because I thought silence kept this town alive. But it didn't. It rotted it from the inside." Cole looked at him. "You still think there are more?" He nodded. "As long as there's land they poured concrete over, yeah, there are more." She sighed. "Then we'll keep digging." He smiled faintly. That's what Jim would have wanted. Weeks later, the federal excavation teams unearthed what the state called secondary burial sites near the old bridge and quarry perimeter. In total, 9 additional remains were found, all consistent with the same time frame, same cause of death, same tools. The Fairvale file was reclassified as a multi-jurisdictional homicide case, but for the town, it was simpler. They called it the Reservoir Murders. Tourists stopped coming. The diner closed, and the once proud Lake Brogan was drained for good, its name struck from all county maps. 6 months later, Cole returned to Fairvale alone. The reservoir had become a shallow field now, covered in new grass. Federal fences lined the perimeter, warning signs every 20 feet. At the center stood a memorial stone. In memory of the unnamed found beneath the water, 1983. Cole placed a single badge on the stone, cleaned, restored, shining under the sun. The wind blew softly through the tall weeds. Somewhere in the distance, a freight train wailed, a long, lonely sound that carried through the hills. She whispered, "Rest now, Jim. Jim." And for the first time in decades, Fairvale was quiet again. But as she walked back to her car, her phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. "You stopped one lake. There are others." Cole looked back once at the field, at the hollow earth that had kept its secret for so long. Then she started the engine, eyes steady on the horizon. Because in America, the water never stays still for long. If you liked this story, please subscribe to the channel for more true crime mysteries.